This is Joanne. Today we're going to discuss what caused the insurrection, the seven-headed monster. Part 1, we're going to talk about the problems. And in part 2, we're going to discuss ideas and thoughts for solutions. The unthinkable has become the reality. Not only are we leading the world with 4,000 deaths a day from COVID-19, we are also losing the status as the leader of the free world, with sedition and insurrection seeking to overturn our legitimate election with a violent takeover of the very heart of our democracy. The Capitol Insurrection on January 6, 2021 was the inevitable implosion resulting from 7 monstrous snakehead forces that have been fed and indulged for years. They have combined into a 7-headed monstrosity that is threatening our democracy, rule of law, national unity, and security. This article will first list these problems. I try my best not to be partisan, and if it does end up riling anyone, my apology. Individual freedom is upheld only by constant vigilance and understanding about what it takes. Authoritarianism is always a possibility in the US, regardless what party you belong to. Snakehead number 1, 30 years of polarizing partisanship collapsing into a dead end. The deteriorating partisanship and polarization for more than 30 years has collapsed into a dead end. The worst partisanship nightmare flamed by Trump's persistent lying about losing the election and inciting a mob's invasion of Congress. When everything is viewed from the colored lens of party affiliation, even commonsensical mask wearing is politicized. The us versus them mentality sacrifices science, truth, facts, and human lives. When applied to distrust the foundation of our democracy, the voting system, the impact of this polarization has monstrous consequences. Our Constitution did not create the two-party system, but imagined a multi-party system. Not a winner-takes-it-all self-looping cycle, but a representative government where diverse and minority voices are heard. However, the entrenched positioning at the extremes of the two-party lines gets little done at the cost of the well-being of the entire country. The toxic culture of one side hating the other and the poisonous "I'm right, you're wrong" positioning is costing all Americans dearly, with more death from COVID, decreased living standards, economic downturn, and moral decline. Snakehead number 2, the out-of-control social media and media propaganda. Social media's echo chamber exponentially multiplies one-sided views and misinformation. Lies go 6 times faster than truth on social media. Facebook's algorithm recommends radical extremists to join like-minded groups. The compounding and reinforcing effects of this echo chamber lead people on both sides to extreme versions of their views, to the point of civil wars and breaking up of a country, as predicted by the Netflix documentary Social Dilemma. The scariest part is that there is never going to be enough human or artificial intelligence to fact-check every lie on the internet. Both social media and TV have spread and amplified disinformation, misinformation, blatant lies, conspiracy theories, and hatred to a susceptible public. Snakehead number 3, a president who is a pathological narcissist and self-serving demagogue. I know, I have offended some people who love Trump. Now, I have faith that sooner or later history will prove the truth. Trump is willing to gaslight, lie, intimidate, manipulate, and weaponize the worst in humanity and the darkest elements in our society for his own power. Trump's incitement of his supporters is based on the psychological weapons of fear and the mentality of they took away what was rightfully yours, your disenfranchised vote, your stolen election, your jobs taken by immigrants, your no longer yours country. He scares his base with the fear of socialism and communism. Oh, they are taking away your guns and religion, imagined or real. Cult building is based on demonizing others. Trump's cult building will last beyond his exit from the White House with emotional, spiritual, cultural, and political grasp on the extremists, and as a so-called victim or martyr in the eyes of his followers. Snakehead number 4, systemic racism. As evidenced by the racial overtones in the riots and the law enforcement's different expectations, preparations, and treatments of Black Lives Matter demonstrations, contrasted with the mob's breach of the Capitol. Even though 93% of the Black Lives Matter demonstrators were peaceful, there were rioters and looters who took advantage of the protest. Nonetheless, the Black Lives Matter demonstration was not based on a big lie, since we all saw George Floyd being killed by a white policeman. The Capitol riot was based on a blatant lie that the election was stolen. In spite of warnings, the police were not prepared under the assumption that the majority of the white demonstrators for Trump's rally would not turn violent, unlike the so-called liberals or leftists. Trump's policy of blaming the immigrants, siding with white supremacists and fringe groups such as Proud Boys and QAnon, and unleashing rage to incite riots were consistent with his prior birther incitement against Obama. Snakehead number 5, decades of decline in mass education. Years of neglecting education has created a fertile ground of ignorance for Trump and his followers to radicalize his base by constantly sowing doubt and distrust about science and the democratic voting system, to replace with the so-called I alone can fix it personality cult, lies, and fear. Democracy depends on education to function, especially when the system is getting more complex. Authoritarianism is based on depriving education critical thinking. Undemocratic regimes can only survive on fears, lies, cult building, divisiveness, and violence. Snakehead number 6, the gridlocked and broken government. Some of the elected representatives are self-serving, catering to the constituency's sentiment and short-term interest of special interest donors. When partisanship, bickering, and attacks, rather than healthy and rational debates, become the acceptable norms, and when party lines are nearing extreme versions of political correctness on both the left and the right, our country will constantly move one step forward and one step back, stagnating in the same place for years instead of moving forward. At the same time, some undemocratic countries have become more powerful on the world stage. Systemic improvements are needed to better hold politicians accountable to serve our country and make democracy less vulnerable with the imperial presidential powers. A US president has too much fast and unchecked power for pardon, executive orders, wars. The pandemic and the insurrection are the watershed moments showing systemic flaws and calling out for reset and reform. Snakehead number 7, COVID-19 and an economic crisis. With the out-of-control pandemic and the economy on life support, it will take some time for America to climb out of the valley. The prolonged and repeated lockdowns have to various degrees affected people's mental and emotional states. The unfair economic burden of the pandemic on the working class will continue to stoke the wildfires of civil unrest and violence. When lies become truth, news becomes opinions, facts become distorted realities, media becomes political propaganda, reason succumbs to blind faith, the denounced becomes glorified, radicalization is preferred over bipartisanship, thugs think themselves as heroes. What will democracy become? What is the state of the union in America? Any good news? If it cannot be any darker, if it cannot go any lower, the good news is that the dawn of light is also inevitable. Our world, our country, history, and future will be moving forward no matter what. America is going through a dark time in its history. We must make deep, wide, thorough, and painful changes, reforms, and resets. Our democracy, our tradition of rule of law, our country are all in our own hands. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Solutions? We will discuss in part 2 later. About the author. Joanne, that's me, is the founder and CEO of 10 Plus Brand Inc., a full-service multimedia branding and brand marketing agency. I'm the brand strategist, the brand builder, and marketing consultant, leading teams of professionals to decode brand DNA, create brand structure, strategies, and stories, and amplify with social media, AI-enabled content marketing, and digital marketing. 10 Plus Brand partners with experts in the world in influencer marketing, digital marketing, and other renowned marketing leaders to make sure your brand stands for something, and then it's amplified. Thank you. Stay tuned.